Mr. Cantos, thank you very much for coming to speak with us. You and Dr. Jose Elias Esteve have been engaged in litigating lawsuits on behalf of Tibetan victims who've suffered at the hands of Chinese authorities against officials in China. What are the charges in the lawsuits? Who are the defendants and who are the plaintiffs?
Well, in the first lawsuit, the charges are genocide, crimes against humanity, torture, and state terrorism. And in the second lawsuit, we have denounced more recent crimes, including the repression of the 2008 peaceful demonstrations and the Nangpala crimes. And those fall generally, although if you want to get academic, it may be more broad, but those fall on crimes against humanity.
I see.
And additionally, we have incorporated to the first lawsuit the crime of war crime against the Fourth Geneva Convention because of the transfer of population from an occupying country to an occupied country, which basically is the first court ruling that Tibet is an occupied country.
I see. So the first lawsuit is based on actions taken by Chinese authorities from 1972 to 2004.
Exactly.
I see. And the second lawsuit is for the repression that occurred in 2008.
Yeah, except we added some crimes that were part of the same systematic attitude against Tibetan people that included the Nangpala crimes that were filmed by independent climbers in 2006, and the judge accepted it.
I see. And who are the defendants in these lawsuits?
Well, in the first lawsuit, the main defendants are Jiang Zemin, ex-president, and Li Peng, ex-prime minister, and 5 more other authorities, military and government authorities. And in the second, there is 7 defendants also, including some ministers and high-level authorities in the present government.
I see. And the lawsuit is being pursued by Tibetan plaintiffs, or how does that work?
The lawsuit is presented by our organization, which is a small Tibet support group based in Madrid, COCAT, and the co-plaintiffs are the Foundation Casa del Tibet of Barcelona.
I see.
And then there is a Tibetan victim, Thupten Wanchen, from director of Fundación Casa del Tibet, who has a Spanish passport, and he's also private accusation.
I see.
And we represent, in this case, the victims, and Thupten Wanchen represents himself.
I see. These lawsuits are taking place because of standing international law with a very important component, the universal jurisdiction.
Yes.
What exactly is that, and what allows a court in Spain, in South Europe, to pursue a case against the People's Republic of China officials in that country for possible crimes committed inside Tibet? How does that work?
Well, universal jurisdiction is a part of international law which allows certain crimes to be investigated by national courts if you can prove that no justice is being made in the country where they were committed, or if it is impossible for other international courts to act on those crimes, like, for example, genocide, crimes against humanity, racial discrimination, female mutilation. These are defined by conventions like the Convention Against Genocide, the Convention Against Torture, and the Rome Statute that gave rise to the International Criminal Court. In this case, the International Criminal Court cannot act on anything regarding Tibet or China because China did not ratify it. And that means that because justice is not made in China either, universal jurisdiction can apply because there is no other way to reach those crimes that there is evidence that have been committed. In this case, national governments of any democracy that has ratified those treaties and has incorporated those crimes, the definition of those crimes and the obligation to investigate those crimes can act.
I see. There have been some other successful prosecutions in the Spanish courts using universal jurisdiction, perhaps the most well-known being General Pinochet,
Yeah.
ex-leader of Chile. What were the charges against him briefly, and what was the outcome?
Well, the Pinochet case was famous because it kind of opened the world to this possibility, which hadn't been explored, because countries signed the treaties defining these new international crimes, but don't really present cases. And thanks to some very, very courageous lawyers like José in the case of Pinochet, and some very courageous judges like Baltasar Garzón, who is now world famous for it. And these cases were presented, and the Spanish legal system was faced with the evidence and the obligation of following them through. And Judge Baltasar Garzón accepted the case of genocide and crimes against humanity of Pinochet against his people. And as the case was accepted and Pinochet traveled out of the country with those accusations, Baltasar Garzón just asked by fax the Euro police, that's the beauty of it, you don't have to involve the government, ask Scotland Yard to arrest him, and they did, which wasn't exactly comfortable for the British government, but the law is the law, and the judicial is the judicial, and it should be separate. And in some countries it works, and in other countries excuses come up, but the fact is that you can.
I see.
And in Spain we have done successful prosecutions to murderers and dictators from Argentina, from Guatemala.
I see.
And one of them has been sentenced, trial, and is in jail in Spain. So whoever says that these cases never reach the end is not really true. They are long, they are slow if you want, but they can reach the truth. They can reach the end.
So this is a very clear illustration of the separation of the judicial system in democratic countries, most
Exactly.
from the government, in that a Spanish court is able to get police authorities in London to make an arrest without going through any government channels.
Literally with a fax.
I see. Interesting.
Of course, England has to check whether the accusation is right, and then you go into a trial for, how do you say, for England to, how do you say, to send back Pinochet to Spain. He has to evaluate what the charges are, and that's part of the process, but it can be done. And
I think many people who may not be that aware of these types of cases, I think might feel that using universal jurisdiction, that a swift and just verdict with a corresponding sentence may be very difficult to achieve, especially with defendants in a country like China today.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to that?
I say that if a member of your family is murdered and you have witnessed it, you don't consider, you have to denounce it, and you have to let justice go as far as it can go. You don't suddenly shut up because you think that it's not going to go the way you wanted, or it's going to be interfered by this or other power or a corrupt policeman. You just have to stand up for the truth, and you have to prove it, you have to give evidence, and if you believe in your judicial system, the law and justice will go as far as it can go. And this is very important for the victims and for the reparation of the dignity of the victims. And in our case, that's what we are most concerned, to search for the truth and to try to give back some dignity to the victims and the families of the victims, so that what they suffered does not fall into oblivion.
In the first lawsuit filed in 2005, which is still ongoing, the case involving activities between 1972 and 2004, what sorts of witnesses and testimonies and evidences, essentially, what sorts of these factors have been presented to the court?
Well, we have had all types of evidence and victims from various generations, like very eminent monks to teachers, to young, to nuns, the famous Drapchi nuns. There's been a steady stream of victim declaration of their ordeal.
They have to come to Spain?
Yeah, they have come to Spain. There is two methods. One, by rogatory commission, which is when they cannot come to Spain, or for whatever reason, economic or whatever, they can testify in where they live. It's a judicial method that it's too long to explain, but it can be done. But most of them have come to Spain, to the court, in front of the judge, and that itself, it's part of justice. Justice is not just putting people in jail. Justice is denouncing the crimes. Justice is investigating the crimes, having a court analyze what you are telling them and double check with the victims and the plaintiffs and the defendants if they want to defend themselves and explain their part. And this is something that you cannot, I mean, it's been going on since Nuremberg, and it is truth and it is healing. And then we've had international experts to explain to the judge the conditions of certain aspects, like, for example, the chain of command in the Chinese government. What are the conditions of population transfer, you know, things that the judge is not familiar. Also, when we present reports that have been written, you know, academic reports and reports of organizations that have studied a particular case like Nang Pala, the people who witness, who were there, actually come to court and they ratify in front of the judge, because the judge, you can give him a DVD, but you know, he doesn't know who did it. So sometimes the judge and we propose to the judge to talk to the person who filmed that, and these people who were in Nang Pala have come to testify. The climber who first denounced it when he saw it has been in front of the judge, and he was crying. For him it was like emotionally very potent, because he saw what he witnessed. And that is inescapable. If you just present a report or a DVD, it's not so thing. So experts also ratify the reports. You present the report and then you ask the author to come and explain and ratify that everything that is in that report is true and that he wrote it.
And you've had several Tibetan ex-political prisoners. People have been detained, like Dana Jimmy Sangbo,
Palden Gyatso, Bagdro, many, and some of the Drapchi nuns.
And recently you've had Dr. Blake Kerr, who was a witness.
Blake Kerr, who was our last witness, presented literally 24 kilos of interviews with women who suffered forced abortion and forced sterilization. He has hidden camera filming of these practices and a lot of evidence. The judge was quite impressed. Normally they don't say much, but it was a very, very important declaration, and it's also one of the pillars. This forced abortion and sterilization is one of the pillars that proves the commission of genocide, which is the partial or total elimination of a group.
And both you and Dr. Esteve have talked about the fact that you are primarily pursuing these legal actions really primarily for the victims. Very clearly you've stated that. And you've also both talked about degrees of justice, degrees of legal satisfaction that is achieved by the very process of litigating, by the very process of pursuing this. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
This is really one of the most important things to try to make people understand. I've said it before, justice is not about accusing and punishing and putting people to jail. Justice is a process of recognition of a crime or an event that has affected one person or hundreds of them. And it is a pursuit of truth. And if I may say, as the Dalai Lama has said repeatedly in many times of his life, one of the most important issues in the Tibet issue is accountability. Accountability, as far as I'm concerned, is synonym of exactly what the law in democratic countries try to do. Investigate, find out. It is important for the victims, for the history of the people, for democratic reconstruction. We have enough evidence in
So in a sense, I mean, victims who've been imprisoned, detained for many, many years, or who've been brutalized, I mean, by the very fact of testifying, of bearing witness to their own experience in front of a judge, is itself a cathartic experience.
Absolutely.
Is itself a justice.
You should have seen Palden Gyatso before he went in to speak to the judge and after. Before, he was really serious and he had a gravity in his face that I will never forget. When he came out, he was dancing. His change had changed, so much so that a Spanish reporter thought he was dancing flamenco, because some of the movements she mistook with flamenco when they were actually, his own expression of relief. And this is something that people have to value, not just get immediately into the political connotations of powerful versus non-powerful and all these contaminations of the process. We stay out of it. And the thing that makes us stay out of it to a certain extent, we are influenced, but we stay out of it mentally and in our hearts, is to think of the victims and to think of their families. And this is what drives us.
I see. Now in 2009, due to various reasons, various forces at play, there were changes in the Spanish constitutional law, which I think is in effect limited the kinds of universal jurisdiction cases that can be pursued to those that have some kind of direct linkage to Spain or to Spanish citizens. And that impacted one of your lawsuits.
Yeah.
Tell us, please.
This was very unfortunate due to the pressure of Chinese government. The Spanish government, in cahoots with the opposition, decided to change in a very almost bordering the illegality, to change the law that controls the limitations to the application of universal justice in Spain, which was actually well known for being the most, according to the actual treaties that gave rise to that law, they were the best, the most progressive, and the most direct application of what the Genocide Convention said.
But the first case involving 1972 to 2004, that's ongoing because one of the co-plaintiffs, a Tibetan, is a Spanish citizen. Yes.
But I think there is more to it than that.
I see.
Judges have a certain autonomy to evaluate why they should continue or not continue with a case with this change of law. There's always ways to bypass those changes. And he can also argue, or he could ask the Constitutional Court himself, say, look, I'm bound because this change of law is going to let me make all these victims, we were going to leave them in the ditch. It's an ongoing case. There is the retroactivity of the law has also been put to question. So there's many legal aspects that are complicated. I'm not even an expert in that. So he may also think that apart from being a Spanish victim, so that's one reason, there's others. And he's been courageous enough not to close it. And not only that, but he's continued, and he has accepted the war crime as an additional crime by the Chinese government, which actually, in the whole, if you read the writ of the court, signifies that Tibet is an occupied country. And that in the middle of the law change and everything. So we have to have faith in our legal system and faith in the ethical values of the judges, that sometimes they are not so easily convinced. I'm not saying that the other judge didn't have reasons to close it. He had, because he, you know, they are very professional and they're very ethically motivated, but the interpretation of the law has always, you know, can always be taken one way or the other. And in this case, the main lawsuit for genocide, where genocide was accepted as crime, is open. He added the war crime against the Fourth Geneva Convention, and he is ready to keep hearing us.
I see.
So that proves that even in the worst conditions, the truth surfaces. And the truth surfaces through a very meticulous and slow process of hammering it with rigorous information, with rigorous experts, rigorous witnesses, and just keep on feeding that truth into the courtroom, not just into the media and shelves of.
I see. I don't quite follow how a legal action that is pursuing charges of genocide, crimes against humanity, tortures, etc., how that touches the political realm of occupation of Tibet. How does that? How does the fact, or especially in light of the fact that Tibet is not recognized as an occupied country by Spain, nor most countries, so how does that come into play?
Well, when we asked the judge to consider this additional crime against the Fourth Geneva Convention, we never just say it in one paragraph. We give ample evidence, bibliographic, historical reports, and many other things to prove that the occupation of Tibet was a military occupation. I mean, historically, it's really hard to prove the opposite, because it was. And we invited up to 7 international scholars, including witnesses of this military occupation with planes and tanks and the whole works, into his village, and the killing that went on. We invited, apart from all the evidence. What does this mean? That if the judge and the state prosecutor, who is generally on the side of the government and possibly always tends to dismiss everything, the judge has priority to do, but the prosecutor gives his opinion. In this case, both the state prosecutor and the judge said that we didn't even need to present the set of 5 or 7 international experts and witnesses, that we had proven with the historical evidence that there had been a military occupation, and because after the occupation China had consistently moved population in a massive way, not to mention recently with the train, etc., had recently, after the occupation, and still recently, were mass transferring population to the point where in some areas Tibetans are a minority in their own country. I mean, this is not very difficult to prove. And that means that we could prove that China had moved massive population into Tibet, And because the occupation of Tibet is considered a historic fact, they recognize that that goes against the Fourth Geneva Convention.
Okay.
And that's called a war crime.
I see. Some people, because the word genocide is such a sensitive and topic with clear associations with the Holocaust in Germany, etc. Some people fear that perhaps if there's a ruling should come about that goes against that charge, that could that set a negative legal precedence in the future? Is that a...
I really don't think so, because the evidence has been piling up for the last 50 years of, I mean, it's not just the Spanish court that has accepted the case, specifically saying that the evidence presented in the lawsuit are, without a shadow of a doubt, present the characters of genocide. That is an admission that, of course, it still needs to be investigated, but I don't think the ruling, if you want, the lawsuit is against defendants and a series of crimes. For one of these lawsuits to be accepted, it has to be very well presented, the evidence, otherwise they won't even go there. So what the court is saying is that there is no doubt that a genocide has been committed, and now let's investigate the specifics that point to the defendants. In that respect, whether the defendants go to trial or not is going to be difficult, but it could happen. Realistically, it possibly won't happen, but it could happen. And then it's really complicated to try to foresee whether this defendant is going to accuse of this crime or maybe not. But in any case, you have no choice. I mean, if you really want to address what has happened, you have to put on the table, and then it is a fair game to you say what you think is the evidence, and the judges will tell you if they don't agree. But not to do it would leave us completely, would lead to impunity. So the fact that maybe at the end they say that, oh, this defendant is not responsible for genocide, but he's responsible of torturing 100 people. Okay, at least we have some form of truth and some form of justice surfacing. And also the International Committee of Jurists has also ruled twice, and these people know what they're talking about. I mean, their bibliography is astounding. So what the Spanish court is the first time that a court says it, but it's not the only time that scholars, academics, and you know, experts have said it. So let's be happy that at least the cases have been accepted in order to see what else the justice did.
I understand. Obviously, the defendants in this case, 7 Chinese officials, are not cooperating in the process of etc. So, should this case succeed? Should there be a ruling? What is a possible outcome for these Chinese officials?
The possible outcome is that the judge is actually in the last phase of the case. It's called summary in Spanish word, and he basically has said that he has heard enough from our side, and he has tried to convene the defendants to defend themselves on the evidence presented. And of course, China and the government has said that they'll never appear, respond, or anything, because it's all based on lies, you know, the usual thing. And they have written to the court, both courts, in terms that have no bearing with the slightest democratic feeling and respect for our judicial and for our government, and they basically want the president, our president, to close the cases. And so because of this lack of cooperation, even to defend themselves or to defend their part of the truth, the judge may be inclined, and we have asked him already, to issue orders of international arrest. This would be...
What does that mean?
That means that he thinks they are prosecutable and that they are involved in possible crimes, and whether they want to answer or not, if they left China, they could be arrested by any country that has a treaty of legal cooperation with Spain, which is most countries. That's what happened with Pinochet. Then whether the extradition would take place is another matter.
I see.
If the country, should they travel outside of China under an order of international arrest, there is the risk of being arrested by a police order, not government order, police order from judge to police. Then the next step would be that country would have to see if they are, if they could be sent to Spain for trial.
I see.
And that would be the other step.
I see. So should such a judgment come about and the officials did not want to take the chance of traveling, they would in effect be imprisoned within China?
Yeah. And there would be the evidence that, you know, a pointing finger that they are not, you know, that they are, you know, that is the end of impunity, because they would have forever those charges against them admitted by a court.
One final question.
Yeah.
You've said that the exiled Tibetan authorities in Dharamsala and also various Tibetan groups in the Tibetan movement across the world, they've been rather shy or timid about using or being associated with the practice of with the use of international law and universal jurisdiction. Why do you think that is? And do you think it's a viable tool to have as a resource in their toolkit?
I think it's more than viable. I think it's very important for any democracy to comply and apply international law. I mean, it's even inconceivable not to. The reason why they haven't been a little bit more enthusiastic or supportive or whatever you want to call it, or shy, could be a good term. You should ask them. But while you ask them, which I don't really know the answer, because there's many people, many organizations, and the response is not linear. I mean, we get a lot of support, taps in the shoulders. Initially, we had a lot of support. Then when the time grew near to present this genocide case in front of the Spanish court, there was signs of panic in here and there, and enthusiasm from the part of victims. And we always went along because we were fighting for the truth, and because we had the victims' opinions and their encouragement with us. The rest, we heard them, we explained, and they did panic a bit, and up to this day there is a certain shyness. My personal interpretation, but I don't know each case, because people are not sometimes willing to explain why they support or not support. I mean, it's all difficult to evaluate. I think it's a mixture of either ignorance or fear. Ignorance because legal matters is not exactly the specialty of the Tibet movement or the Tibetan government in exile, so they are not sure. You know, all you've been asking me needs explaining. Or fear because obvious repercussions, political, social, diplomatic. There's always this fear of the big giant spanking us. And I think we must go beyond that, quite frankly.
You are essentially, basically, by profession, oceanographer.
A physicist, yeah, physical oceanographer.
And Dr. Estevez is a law professor.
Yeah.
And the two of you have invested, obviously, for the last decade, quite a number of, let's say,
our lives.
Your lives, essentially. What is your feeling? Are you satisfied with this project to date? Are you happy that you started it?
I'm absolutely happy, and even though it may look like we are helping people, we feel that the whole process also helps us as human beings because of what we've been able to witness through the suffering of others. It has helped us to work without ego. It has helped us to learn how to carry on against all odds and against criticism, against threats, against all types of difficulties, and until we find ourselves in a mission that we will never give up, because we have this commitment to the victims, and we will take it as far as the law allows us. And it's been very satisfying, very, very hard. It's still very, very hard, but it's still something we are grateful to, whoever we have to be grateful, and we are particularly grateful to the example of the Tibetan victims and the Tibetan resilience, which I hope will take them to what is, for us, legally speaking, the only, our work is there, and we hope that they at least appreciate.
Mr. Alan Cantos, thank you very much for coming by.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity.